7. The Boys' deaths too brutal to adapt faithfully. Why do audiences love The Boys so much? Well, there are many reasons, like the clever jokes, the socio-political plot lines, and the fact that Antony Starr puts in an Emmy-winning performance each and every episode. But one of the unspoken reasons is the many gruesome deaths we witness every season, because, by God, they are awesome. We mean, tragic. But even in a franchise like The Boys, there are certain moments from the source material that are too brutal to adapt faithfully. So, without further ado, these are 7 The Boys deaths that you'll be glad you never saw, and fair warning, number 4 is way too graphic to even talk about, but we'll do it anyway for you guys. Stormfront. It feels insane saying that a character that got burned to a crisp and had to cut their own tongue off to off themselves had a more brutal death in the comics, doesn't it? The show reimagined Stormfront as a woman, gave her an extended romance and Nazi takeover arc, and an off-screen death that, while not visible to us, felt entirely justified. Stormfront thought she could convince Homelander to establish the Fourth Reich with her charm, sexuality, and free handies, despite losing 3 of her 4 limbs. Her condition was critical after her face-off with the girls, to be fair, but Ryan's heat vision did such a number on her she remembered how to speak German. Homelander was never going to give her anything, and he was going to take everything he could from her, which is why Ayakash's version of Stormfront took itself out in unceremonious fashion. But in doing so, Amazon avoided the pure animalistic brutality of the comic version of Stormfront's demise. In The Boys issue 34, the team finally confronts Stormfront after goading the leader of Payback into a fight for 24 hours. The battle goes badly for them at first because Stormfront separates them and goes after Butcher alone. He survives a crowbar to the mouth and gut punches Butcher so hard they start talking about World War II. But once Frenchie, MM, and Love Sausage arrive to back him up, it turns into a full-on curb stomp, with Stormfront's face and skull literally being shaved off with every swing of their boots and bats. Remember that Frenchie and MM have taken Compound V in the comics, and Love Sausage is an honest-to-God Russian superhero. The Brit, the Yank, the Frenchman, and the Red take out their common enemy on D-Day in spectacular fashion. But we think that The Boys getting it done was A, not putting the starlight on the girls, which we appreciate the show for, and B, way too graphic to be faithfully adapted. Queen Maeve. To say that Queen Maeve didn't get a complete makeover in the show compared to her comic book counterpart would be the understatement of the decade. In the comics, she was a nihilistic drunk who was practically forced to do the right thing, and even then she didn't do it until the last possible moment. The show instead let Maeve get an extended run as the mole within Vought, made her a much more relatable character, earned a full redemption arc, and even survive her big sacrifice. By rights, she should have died when she dove out of Vought Tower with Soldier Boy and got the V fried out of her system. Instead, she was able to ride off into the sunset with Elena, and the loss of an eye was not even a loss compared to what she'd gained. In the show, Maeve is still alive, living with the love of her life somewhere, but in the comics, she's not that good or lucky. In The Boys issue 63, Queen Maeve is caught helping Starlight escape and finally decides to openly make her stand against Homelander. She hurls Starlight to safety, charges Homie with her sword, and her signature weapon simply shatters on his head. Maeve played the quiet game for too long in Ennis' work, unlike show Maeve, who knew exactly how to push John's buttons, and for that she was killed off-panel. But that doesn't mean we don't witness the consequences, because we do. The next time we see her, it's her severed head, which Homelander casually throws out for Starlight to find, turning her heroic stand into a cruel message. Fall in line or you'll follow your hero to the grave. This is far more brutal than what happened to Maeve in the comics, and a sobering reminder that not everything you see aligns with the things we've read. The mass soup head explosion. The show's take on the head-popping storyline was as unique as it was narratively appropriate. We still remember that courtroom scene where Jonah Vogelbaum was rolled in on his wheelchair to testify against Vought, and Victoria Newman went on an absolute killing spree. We miss Vicky and the days where her being a cutthroat politician was the biggest worry in our lives. But to be completely honest, that courtroom scene had nothing on the comic book panel that inspired it. Early in the comics run, a massive conspiracy was hatched by Vought to take over the Russian government using little Nina and a batch of knockoff soups as their main political pawns. It was supposed to be easy. Nina gets elected with the help of her soups, Vought gets a firm foothold in the former Soviet Union, and then rids themselves of their patsies by triggering a device that pops off all their heads at once. But once the boys stepped in, everything went sideways, and we got a preview to Butcher's ultimate plan for a soup genocide. After killing Nina with a blow-up vibrator, don't ask, he steps into the warehouse where her soups were hanging out and kills all of them with a press of the button in a scene that feels like a realistic adaptation of that sequence from The Kingsman. It was a final, brutal purge of the faux soup population of Russia, and a visual statement about how disposable these quote-unquote gods really are. Even in a show as graphic as The Boys, depicting that many head explosions accurately in that specific political context would push well past what a mainstream streamer is willing to put on screen. But frankly, even that pales in comparison to what we'll be addressing next. The deaths of Becca Butcher and the baby. The Becca storyline is much better in Amazon's The Boys because it shows us the lengths to which Vought can go to keep their assets in control. She disappears after that incident with Homelander is presumed dead for several years, rediscovered as being alive with his son, and then has a final heroic stand trying to protect that same son. Her original counterpart didn't get anything nearly as good. In fact, her life story was a complete horror show that makes Butcher's hatred for Homelander and Soups feel that much more justified. In the comics, Becky Butcher doesn't disappear after her assault. She returns to Billy and tries to rebuild a normal life, only for the pregnancy to advance at a terrifying rate. About 3 months in, the fetus is almost fully formed, and one night it claws its way out of Becky's stomach while they're in bed, killing her instantly. Amazon uses this tale twice, actually. Once when Vogelbaum and Stillwell lie to Homelander about Becca's death, and then again when Barb tells him the quote-unquote truth about his birth. Anyway, because of all the commotion, Billy wakes up, turns on the light, and finds the room painted in blood with a baby floating above her body, umbilical cord still attached, already manifesting powers and trying to blast him with its eyes. He grabs a lamp and beats the baby to death just to survive, a moment the show completely rewrites by turning Ryan into a living, sympathetic child instead of an instant horror icon. In many ways, Becky Butcher's storyline is more realistic than what happens in the show, but realism isn't something people can stomach all the time, which is why we're glad they did what they did with her and Ryan. Mother's Milk. You guys are missing out on so much diabolical stuff from the comics that we'd recommend you give it a read, because over there, all the boys are Soups themselves. Huey joins the party quite late, admittedly, but by the end, even he's V'd up. But you know what that means for them, right? Before everything's said and done, they all gotta go, and by The Boys issue 68, Butcher has decided to do just that. He goes on a rampage against his own teammates, and no one gets it as bad as the man called Mother's Milk. When MM confronts him about killing Frenchie and Kimiko, Butcher tells him he's the best mate he ever had, pulls the pin on a grenade and jams it into his face, blowing out his eyes and mutilating him beyond recognition. MM barely clings to life even after that thanks to the V in his system. But because he's still alive, Butcher calmly smothers him to finish the job. The show keeps MM as the moral axis of the team, ducking the comic's bleak reveal of just how far gone Butcher really is. And if you ask us, him murdering a man he called his best friend in cold blood is more brutal than what he did to Vicky. Soldier Boy. Jensen Ackles' Soldier Boy can't even be compared to the one from the comics because that guy's such a coward, he routinely pisses his unitards. While Jensen's Soldier Boy will most likely go out in a blaze of glory, the same can't be said for his original, whose death was actually rather disquieting. In the early 30s issues of The Boys, Soldier Boy and Payback go up against the Boys and are utterly humiliated. They were dispatched by Vought to take down the Boys, and they thought they'll get a promotion out of it. Better pay, more visibility, and maybe they replace the Seven as Vought's premier team. But as bad as regular human Butcher is, a Butcher with V from the get-go is a lot worse. And when Huey expresses concern about him soloing Payback, Frenchie says a prayer, not for him, but for the members of Payback. Butcher single-handedly takes out most of them while Stormfront escapes, only to die later. Well, to be fair, he had Terror helping him as well, and while Crimson Countess, Mindstorm, and Swatto die horrifying deaths, none of their fates are as bad as Soldier Boy's. He has his nose bitten off by Butcher, gets a shovel stuffed through half his head, and is then captured and tortured by him. While we thought him screaming out the names of US states was hilarious at first, when we saw Butcher take his namesake cleaver to Soldier Boy at the end of chapter 34, we felt bad for the guy. He was never going to come home, and Vought would be receiving pieces of him in the mail for decades if it was up to Billy. Jensen Ackles' Soldier Boy isn't going to go out strapped to a chair with the fear of God in him, but he might lose his nose like his comic counterpart did, which would be the only thing that's similar about them. The 9/11 cover-up. This is a sequence that will never be shown on American television because of obvious reasons. In The Boys issue 36, Garth Ennis tackles America's darkest moment head-on by having the Seven intercept that hijacked plane and utterly fail to save it. Through arrogance and incompetence, they make the situation worse, and the plane ends up crashing into the Brooklyn Bridge instead of the World Trade Center, because even Ennis was considerate enough not to recreate that entirely. But taking the plane to the Brooklyn Bridge was way worse, because the Seven ended up killing everyone on board and an innumerable number of civilians on the ground. The sequence is laced with ugly dialogue, including racist outbursts and Soups killing passengers themselves, underlining that these heroes are monsters in capes. And unlike Amazon's version, all of it happens in the public eye, including the death of Mr. Marathon. The show reworks this into the Flight 37 incident, which is still horrifying but scaled down and stripped of the explicit 9/11 imagery. Homelander and Maeve's actions on that flight remained private for a very long time, which is still one of the worst things they've ever done. But the original sequence's public nature, racial outbursts, and extreme gore would have made it unairable on television, even more so than the Flight 37 footage that Homelander now claims is a deepfake. While you guys might have seen some of these in some fashion in Amazon's The Boys, you will never see them being recreated exactly how they were, and now you know why. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content from the Boysverse. One last time, we'll see you soon with yet another video, so until then, stay safe and have a great day.